I love that. That's really neat. I want to talk now kind of one of the things that I've never interviewed anyone about on this program, and that's why I was so excited to get you on here, which is the Omega program. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this right now have probably never heard that term at any point in time, probably have no idea what we're about to talk about. So could you kind of set up the background of what the Omega program was, and then we'll get into it from there?
Yeah, if anybody's familiar with like the MACV SOG from Vietnam, it was where, special operations guys augmented the CIA to do certain missions, covert missions and stuff like that, and in areas that, for example, maybe military is not legally authorized to operate in, whereas the CIA is. So through proxy of like the authorities, we were able to work in areas that we wouldn't be able to work in, and we were able to bring assets that they didn't have available. So that's typically the premise behind the whole thing. We were force multipliers for the CIA for like ground branch. So they had their intel gathering elements. We could also leverage JSOC's intel gathering elements and synchronize that stuff to find targets. But ultimately, it's not anything that crazy. It's just an element of the CIA that kind of works and does similar stuff to the Ranger Regiment and CAG and SEAL Team 6. They're basically like a tier one task force, assault force, but they didn't have a lot of the assets we had. Like we had aviation assets. We could use 160th. We could bring call for fire. We could drop missiles, HIMARS, bring in more asset ISR platforms and stuff like that. So, and then also because of making us the leaders. So the way this worked is they would do operations, but the liaisons like us, the Rangers or whoever it was assigned would be the leadership. So we would be reporting directly to JSOC on behalf of the CIA, basically.
And how did you get picked to join this program?
Well, the regiment was required to fill these positions. It's kind of like a tasking that comes down. It's like, hey, we got to put dudes in this position. There were so many different operating elements at the time, they didn't have enough guys to cover all of it. So SEAL Team 6 was actually tied into doing a lot of the Omega program stuff for a while. And then RRD guys, back before it became RRC, were tied into that. But then the RRC guys ended up pulling out, going elsewhere, doing other operations. So they needed to backfill that. So they backfilled it with Line Ranger Battalion guys. And at the time, I was at RIP. I was a RIP cadre. And my first sergeant came down. He's like, hey, dude, he's like, you want to go overseas, do some, he said, like, cool guy stuff or whatever. I'm like, yeah, whatever. What you got? And he's like, all right, you can start growing your beard out and don't have to cut your hair and wear civilian clothes. And then I was like, okay, sounds cool. But I had no clue. Like, I didn't know what it was about. And then I got overseas and I linked up with my team. And the first time I did it, I was down in southern Afghanistan. And I flew on a plane all by myself, coordinated my own flight, flew down there. I knew I was supposed to be linking up with the team at this location. I get there and trucks roll up. It's a bunch of SEAL Team 6 dudes. And they're like, what's up, dude? Hey, welcome to the team. Like welcome me right in, just like one of the guys. I'm like, hey, what's up? And then we started talking and the team leader was like, hey, how many deployments you have? And at that time I had 8 combat deployments. And he's like, dude, you have more combat deployments than the rest of these guys that are here. He's like, I'm going to make you my assistant team leader. So I ended up being the assistant team leader for him on that trip. And we did split operations at times. And I'll pause here in case you want to interject or focus me in another direction.
No, no, no. So I'm curious what you were just about to say. Split operations, like that's the next question. What type of operations are you trying to do with this kind of elite small group of people?
So at the time, you got to realize, tier one dudes or, any operator for that fact, wants to be where the best fighting's going on, right? We want to be where the baddest gunfights are going on at, right? So at that time, Rangers were flying in, landing on our compound to stage and popping out and smashing dudes down south. So the SEAL Team 6 dudes were like, hey, we want to go with those guys. So they started just tagging along and doing split missions with them because the CIA is not doing missions every single day. They're a little bit fewer and far between, whereas the Rangers were out there smacking stuff day in and day out, as were the other task forces. So that when they would go and do that, they would leave me in the rear so that I could take the other half of the team out with the CIA if the mission popped up. So at times it was like kind of sucky. The team leader would go out with a couple of the SEAL Team 6 guys, but then he would leave a few of them with me in case we needed to roll out with the agency. But that only happened a couple times. And then we started getting busy with the agency. but I did some stuff with the agency by myself at times, and then we did a lot of joint stuff. So we were working with the strike force of the Rangers, and we were also working with the agency hitting their targets as well. It just
So you
depended on what was big and what popped up, what was priority.
so you're talking about how you want to be where the baddest gunfights are, where the heaviest fighting is. I love that. I think that's badass as hell. What type of combat did you see as part of this Omega team?
It was a little different for me, because typically, as Rangers were like kitted up, camouflage uniforms, clean shaven, with a military-ish type haircut, regular combat rifles, like the pictures you see all over the internet. That's the way we work. But on this program, there was a lot of reconnaissance that we did, right? I don't want to go too much into the weeds on this stuff, but a lot of reconnaissance that we did that required us to go out during the daytime, low vis. So I was dressed up, had longer hair. Like I'd been growing my hair for like 6 or 8 months by the time I got overseas. That's the way they used to do it. They'd let us grow our hair and beard for like 6 months before we deployed. Um, so I kind of looked similar to an Afghan a little bit, and then we would dress up like Afghans and go out and do reconnaissance work, which required us going out low vis, which put us in some sketchy situations at times. We did that. I did that. We did that as military guys alone, but we also did it with the agency in support of their operations as well.
So let me ask something on that. When you're wearing Afghan clothes, how are you able? I'm assuming you're not able to just have an M4 slung across your chest, but you are armed. So what are you armed with, like pistols and
Yeah.
stuff?
Typically, we would have a pistol on us concealed, and then we'd have some sort of small like submachine gun, like an MP7 or MP5K or something like that we could stuff down in the seat and kind of hide pretty easily. It gives us a little bit more firepower and a bigger magazine. And then depending on the mission, some missions that may be all that we roll with, but there are some missions where we anticipate there's more of a risk. We would probably have like a backpack in the trunk of the car or somewhere stashed where it can't be seen easily, with a collapsed down AR-15 with some grenades and mags and med pouches and things like that in there, and excess radios, GPSs, phones, whatever we needed. Basically, like a blowout bag. Like people talk about blowout bags. That's what those were, our blowout bags. If the crap hit the fan really bad and I needed serious firepower, I would bail out, ditch the car, snag my backpack, and roll.
And you just said you got into some sketchy situations as part of this program. Can you talk to us? Are there any you're able to talk about where things got real dicey?
Yeah, there was this one time where the ground branch guys were like, "Hey, we need some extra shooters to roll with us. We're gonna go out and get eyes on the target and figure out if the bad guy's there." Some reconnaissance stuff, basically, and they call it the AFO team. And I was like, "Shoot, yeah, I'll roll with you." I loved doing that stuff. It was my first time rolling around doing a lot of low vis stuff, so I thought it was super cool. It was just kind of different, I'm like used to kicking indoors all the time. This is different. So I enjoyed it, and I rolled out with these guys. And what they would do is they would roll out before our assault force would roll out. And we typically roll out together, and we'd find a spot to kind of hang out for a little bit. And then the recce element would go up, check the target. And then once they confirmed that bad guys were there, then they would call the strike force while they had eyes on still. Strike force would come hit the target. And the strike force would include the rest of the Rangers or SEAL Team 6 dudes, and then the ground branch guys with their endage.